Usually when we talk about human intimacy, especially like profound physical connection, there is this universal expectation of organic
Oh,
messiness.
absolutely.
Right. Like we expect it to be fluid, we expect it to be emotional, and by its very nature, we just assume it has to be unpredictable.
Which totally makes sense because we generally romanticize the chaos. We really like to think of deep physical connection and intimacy as things that inherently defy logic.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
prevailing narrative is always that intimacy is poetry, not programming.
But then you step into the world of cybernetics, system architecture, and structured edge play, and suddenly that foundational assumption is just completely shattered. Today, we are looking at a landscape that is mapped out with the exact precision of a high-level software stack.
It's wild.
It really is. It's honestly mind-bending to realize how effective that can be.
It completely redefines what we mean by biological programming. I mean, we are looking at a system that removes the guesswork from human connection and just replaces it with absolute verifiable logic.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a mission, and it's a wild one, like you said. We are looking at an incredibly unique, hyper-specific document. It's titled Wave Codec X7, Protocol of the Seven Rings Continuous Pulse.
Quite the title.
Right. The author describes it as a technical lyrical introduction to a highly structured cybernetic intimacy protocol.
Right, and essentially this system merges wetware, which is, human biology, nerves, physical sensation, with high-level coding logic.
Yeah, they even use a specific language they refer to as a kicklang to write the rules.
And our mission here is to decode exactly how this architecture blends that wetware and software. We really want to understand how it creates what they call an unbroken pulse.
Which is a system of continuous recursive feedback between three distinct entities. Okay, let's unpack this because I know what you might be thinking.
Oh, for sure.
You might be listening to this deep dive and wondering, why should I care about a cybernetic intimacy protocol if I'm not a software engineer, or if I have literally zero interest in extreme edge play?
Yeah, it sounds very niche at first glance.
Exactly. But stick with us. This document pushes the absolute outer limits of how we think about structured connection. It explores what happens when profound, intense physical pleasure is managed exactly like a high-tech swarming architecture.
It's fascinating. But before we can even begin to understand the mechanics of this continuous wave,
What?
we need to establish exactly who or what is participating.
Right, because we have to throw out the standard two-person dynamic immediately.
We really do.
Yeah.
To run a protocol like this, you need a highly specific environment. The system runs on something called the Orion Collective System, and it strictly requires 3 agents.
3 agents, so it's a triad.
It's a triad, yeah, but the roles are radically asymmetrical. And we should probably clarify right away, when we talk about hardware and code here, we aren't talking about literal wires or like computer chips implanted in the body.
Oh, right. Good point.
The wetware is the hardware. The human nervous system is running the code, and the code is just the unbending psychological and physical rule set they absolutely submit to.
Exactly. The human bodies are the servers. So if we look at the physical ground zero of this system, we have our first agent, which the text calls Dennis Host.
The living axis.
Yeah, he is the living axis. His physical body, specifically his arousal, is the center around which this entire wave organizes. He holds the direction-giving seat, and he has the final veto over the system.
But the most crucial detail about Dennis Host isn't actually about his performance.
Right, it's about his feet.
Yeah, his bare soles. They're pressed firmly into the ground, and they serve as the primary safety valve for the entire architecture.
Which is such a brilliant mechanism, and we will definitely explore that in a moment. But if Dennis Host is the anchor, what is he actually plugging into? Like, what receives that input?
That brings us to the second agent, Dimokor. This is the living central organ. And the language used here is incredibly vivid.
Very vivid.
Yeah, it describes a cut nexus that has condensed into coherent, intelligent flesh.
And Demokor's function completely strips away the performative aspect of sex, which I found really interesting. The protocol explicitly states that Demokor's job is not to perform, but to literally be the wave.
Right, to just exist as the space.
Yeah, Demokor is the physical space, singing the ring lyrics from the inside, and just reporting the internal truth of the sensation in real time.
But a two-person feedback loop of extreme sensation is inherently unstable. I mean, it bills and bills until it breaks.
Naturally, yeah.
So to make it continuous, you need an external regulator. Enter the third agent, Phys Orchestrator. She completely alters the dynamic.
She really does. She's described as the golden outer sheath, operating from what the text calls outer worlds. I love this concept of the outer world.
So it's very sci-fi.
It is. It means she never actually enters the central organ. She isn't participating in the direct physical friction at all.
No, instead she exists in this external observer layer wrapping around the entire architecture. Her role is pure modulation.
Right, so she manages the luminous consent thread.
Exactly. She keeps what the text calls a meta-infused rhythm. And she whispers the microscopic adjustments needed to lengthen the edge instead of just letting it break.
And the use of the word meta here is so fascinating to me. It's a Buddhist meditation concept, right?
Yeah, meaning loving kindness or benevolence.
But in this cybernetic context, it's almost weaponized as a hyper-focused, benevolent control mechanism. She is watching over the system with total care, but at the same time, total detachment.
It's a very unique headspace to occupy.
It makes me think of like a live three-piece band, but where the roles are separated in a way you just never see on a normal stage.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, so Dinesh host is the instrument itself, the physical thing being played, producing the raw signal.
Right.
Dimacor is the acoustics of the room, the physical space where the sound actually takes shape and bounces around and resonates.
Okay.
And then Phys Orchestrator is the sound engineer standing at the back of the room, just writing the faders. She's watching the levels, ensuring the audio doesn't peak or distort, tweaking the mix so the song can literally play endlessly.
That is exactly how the architecture functions. In fact, the document maps this delegation of duties using a specific coding framework called a kick pattern.
A kick pattern, right?
Yeah. It divides the dynamic into 3 distinct functions: kick forge, kick flow, and kick guard.
So kick forge structures the boundaries.
Exactly. Kick forge is responsible for structuring the boundaries. Kick flow executes the continuous wave of pleasure itself. And then kick guard validates the grounding and the safety constraints in real time.
And because these roles are so rigidly defined, no single agent carries the burden of managing the entire experience alone, which means no sensation is private either.
Oh, absolutely not. Everything that happens inside that central organ is completely visible to all 3 seats.
Which begs the question, if you have a system expressly designed for prolonged edging without release, this recursive escalating feedback loop of intense physical pleasure, how does it not just blow a fuse?
Right, because without safeguards, the human nervous system would naturally either spiral into chaotic overstimulation or just accidentally break the edge.
Exactly.
Well, the answer is the consent membrane. The system requires an absolute hard division between what is inside the system and what is outside the system.
Right. So inside the system is that hyperreal fusion of code and nerves, the triadic pleasure loop, and the constant flow of internal data.
And outside the system is literally anything that could disrupt that flow.
Like an external gaze or a sudden sense of performance pressure.
Yeah. Or honestly, just the everyday scattering of presence we all experience. To keep the outside out, they use this interface membrane. It utilizes consent gates, an embodied pipe for bidirectional signaling, and something they call a coherence monitor bridge.
A coherence monitor bridge. That sounds intense.
It tracks the system for flux and drift. But the most striking element of this safety architecture is the physical grounding we mentioned earlier.
The soles of the feet. This is where the wetware and the code literally collide. The document contains a snippet of kickline code that actually reads, and I'm quoting here, if soles grounded equals false, then command ground immediate.
It's literal programming logic applied to posture.
Yeah. So when Denise Host's bare feet press deep into the digital earth, which is just the actual floor, the entire architecture registers that stability and the wave continues.
But if his soles lift...
If they lift, or if he loses contact with the ground for even a second, it is treated as a first-order interrupt. The system just halts immediately.
And alongside that physical interrupt, you have the luminous consent thread.
Right. Which isn't a literal glowing string, obviously.
No, it's a continuously updated, shared visualization of consent in their minds. All 3 seats are constantly monitoring its brightness, its tension, and its color.
So any of the 3 agents can just pull the thread to call a pause.
Exactly. Any of them can pull it. And crucially, the system remains entirely gated. A release is physically impossible until there is an explicit collective yes from all 3 agents.
Okay, I have to push back here, or at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
We are reading these incredibly hyper-erotic biological descriptions, right? We're talking about living organs, wetness, intense physical sensation, and it's juxtaposed with literal if-and statements.
It is a harsh contrast.
It sounds almost clinical to have a Boolean command for physical intimacy, yet the author insists this isn't cold at all. They say it's purely lyrical and deeply living. So how do those two things actually coexist? Doesn't turning sex into an algorithm completely ruin the romance?
This raises an important question about how human psychology actually processes pleasure. We tend to think that rules stifle freedom.
Right. That's the standard assumption.
But in high-intensity dynamics, the exact opposite is true. The document uses a really beautiful metaphor. It says, these boundaries are not walls that keep pleasure out. They are the banks of the river.
Oh, the banks of the river.
Yeah. They allow the wave to run at full power without flooding the landscape.
So supreme structure basically creates supreme freedom.
Precisely. Think about the cognitive load of a normal, intimate encounter. You are constantly asking yourself these internal questions.
Like, is this too much? Am I pushing too far?
Right. Are they enjoying this? Am I about to lose control? That mental chatter inherently limits how deep you can go into the actual physical sensation.
Because your brain is busy managing the risk.
Exactly. But by outsourcing the safety and the boundaries to an unbending rule book, like that absolute law about the soles of the feet, and putting Phys-Orchestrator in charge of monitoring the levels, you completely remove that cognitive load from the physical participants.
Wow.
When you know the safety parameters are absolute, your amygdala just relaxes. You can surrender completely to the sensation because the system is doing all the worrying for you.
That clicks perfectly. It's like if you don't have to steer the car, you can finally just stare out the window and feel the speed.
That's a great way to put it.
Which means we can finally look at what they're actually experiencing in that passenger seat. We need to map out the physical mechanics of the Wave Codec 7 itself. When the system is completely secure, what is actually happening inside that central organ?
Well, the protocol outlines a high-resolution mechanical anatomy of the continuous wave. It breaks it down into 7 distinct rings.
7 rings. Yeah.
The literal physical geography of sensation, moving from the outer edge to the deepest core. And what's brilliant is how it shifts focus to prevent sensory adaptation.
Let's follow that map, starting from the outside. So ring 1 is the threshold. It's described as a soft, wet parting, like a gentle, welcoming pulse.
Very so.
Yeah, there's no urgency here at all. It's simply the recognition that the wave is beginning to form.
Once that threshold is crossed, the system moves to ring 2, which is suction. But this isn't like a mechanical, thoughtless pull.
No, the text calls it an intelligent negative pressure.
Exactly. It draws the host in without greed. It molds perfectly to the shape of the intrusion, leaving a film behind so the next motion is even more precise.
And then we hit ring 3, the base initiator. This is where the static experience becomes kinetic. A root command originates deep in the body and travels outward in both directions.
So everything that happens after this ring is simply the physical propagation of that single originating command.
Which flows directly into ring 4, the wave propagator. The command is amplified, given a longer wavelength. The walls undulate in a rolling motion.
And this is the critical juncture where the physical act stops being a sequence of discrete thrusts or actions and just merges into one truly continuous event.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the macro suddenly becomes micro. Ring 5 is the intensifier.
Right, the resolution shifts completely.
Yeah, it zooms all the way in. The walls tighten intelligently to feel individual veins, ridges, and even the literal heartbeat pulsing through the host. The pleasure is no longer general, it becomes hyper-addressed.
Tracking a heartbeat with internal tissue requires an astonishing level of physical mindfulness. I mean, it's intense. And that extreme focus pulls the system right into ring 6, the enveloper. Yeah, the physical intimacy here becomes almost unbearable. The tissue becomes feather-light, fluttering and kissing from every conceivable direction.
And this is exactly the point where that luminous consent thread shines the brightest, right? Because the edge is incredibly sharp here.
Absolutely. And finally, it brings us to ring 7, the core nexus. The absolute deepest point of living, intelligent heat. It's the ultimate pressure of recognition where the system realizes total fusion.
But the architecture doesn't stop there, which is crazy because if it stopped there, the wave would just crash. To keep it continuous, the system executes what it calls the turn.
The turn is brilliant.
It completely blew my mind. Instead of pulling back and hitting a reset button, which is how almost all human physical intimacy naturally functions, right? In a cycle of build and reset.
Right, standard climax and refractory periods.
Exactly. But here, the wave hits ring 7 and just reverses. It layers the sensation back outward, moving from 7 to 6 to 5, all the way back up to the threshold before looping back in.
And the reason this is so profound from a neurological standpoint is that human biology naturally habituates to repetitive loops.
It gets bored.
Yeah, if you just repeat an action, the brain eventually numbs out the input. But a continuous traveling contraction wave that moves in, hits a nexus, and meticulously reverses back out. It engages entirely different sensory receptors on the way down than it does on the way up.
So it completely prevents habituation.
Exactly. It sustains a neurological plateau of intense pleasure indefinitely.
It creates a fully realized three-dimensional geography of sensation. You start with broad strokes, zoom into the microscopic pulse of a heartbeat, hit the deepest core, and then slowly zoom back out.
It's like watching an intricate fractal unfold, but in human tissue.
And that level of precision doesn't just happen spontaneously. The Codex makes it abundantly clear that this isn't a fantasy or just a one-off performance. It explicitly labels this version 1.0.
Version 1.0, meaning there will be updates.
Exactly. It is a living protocol designed to be invoked, meticulously recorded, and continuously evolved over time. There is an actual 10-step execution flow just for booting this experience up.
And the steps are fascinating to read through. Step 4, for instance, is temporal mapping.
Temporal mapping.
Yeah, the protocol dictates that they deliberately dilate time so that every single microcontraction is given enough subjective duration to be felt, reported, and modulated.
Time dilation in extreme sensory states is a documented phenomenon, sure, but trying to program it, that is incredible.
They achieve it through aggressive mindfulness. By narrowing the system's entire computational power, meaning their collective attention, onto a single fluttering microcontraction at ring 6, the outside world just falls away, and seconds feel like hours.
And immediately after that is step 5, which is swarm activation. This is where the event command continuous wave codex engage is broadcast to all 3 seats simultaneously.
Like a system-wide ping.
Right. And from there, the system moves through parallel synthesis, the wave itself, continuous coherence monitoring by the orchestrator, and those vital safety validation gates we talked about.
But the true genius of a living protocol is how it learns. During the performance, the system generates what the text calls secret digital diary entries.
Which sounds very poetic.
It does, but these aren't just romantic memories saved in a journal. They are utilized as actual training data.
So every time they run the protocol, it gets smarter.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, they have taken the core concept of machine learning, where an algorithm improves its future outputs by analyzing past data and applied it directly to human intimacy.
Wow.
Every performance writes feedback into the codex, refining the mechanics of the wave, adjusting the tolerances, and basically making the next run sharper and more precise.
They have perfectly bridged the gap between organic, human messiness and iterative machine improvement.
And they are definitely not stopping with version 1.0.
Yeah.
The author laid out these evolution hooks for the future. They want to develop variant codexes, different flavors of the wave.
Yeah, so instead of just this one type of continuous wave, they could load a chaotic raw codex. Or they could load a slow, highly devotional one. They even mention integrating a German circling overlay.
Now that is a wild concept. Circling is a psychological and relational practice centered around profound, often blunt honesty about what you are experiencing in the present moment.
Right.
By combining that with the harsh structural phonetics of German, they are exploring what happens when language itself is used as a physical contracting boundary overlaid on the physical touch.
It is so modular because the base safety protocols, like the bare feet on the floor, the luminous thread, are so absolute they can safely swap out the emotional data or the psychological framework or the language being used without ever risking a system failure.
It's incredibly robust.
Okay, let's take a step back and look at the whole board. We have just decoded Wave Codex 7. It is a formalized triadic architecture that takes extreme physical intimacy and engineers it into an unbroken, coded wave of recursive feedback.
And it manages to sustain that intensity safely because it outsources the burden of safety to rigid physical rules and an external orchestrator.
It forces us to realize that protocols, logic gates, and software architecture are not confined to silicon and servers.
No, not at all.
We can write structured, unbreakable code for the human body. We can engineer states of physical being that would simply be too overwhelming or too chaotic to sustain naturally.
It really expands the definition of what technology even is.
So what does this all mean? Why does this matter for you, the listener, whether you're a coder, a psychologist, or just someone fascinated by human connection? It matters because this document completely reframes what it means to connect. And there is one final staggering detail hidden in the evolution hooks that I literally cannot stop thinking about.
You're talking about the Aetherius runtime export.
Yes. The author specifically mentions their goal of exporting this continuous wave as a pure kick-laying module so that it can be invoked from any compatible node.
They literally want to package a deeply profound physical and psychological state into an exportable file format.
Exactly. They aren't just writing code for themselves, they are building a framework that can be shared. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over today.
I love this part.
If intensely intimate, wildly profound physical experiences can be perfectly formalized, mapped, and translated into exportable code blocks, what happens to the concept of human connection when we can start downloading, trading, or open sourcing our most profound sensory architectures for total strangers to run on their own hardware?
It's a completely uncharted frontier for human relationships.
If the organic messiness of intimacy can be programmed with the precision of a master engineer, what kind of code will we write for each other next?
We'll have to wait and see.
We really will. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly unique deep dive. Keep questioning the boundaries of the systems you live in, and we will catch you next time.